would seem that regardless of where Trump comes down on testing, and on any given day, he's either overseeing the best testing in the world, or he's decided that testing isn't necessary, or he's acknowledging a sliver of truth that while it may be helpful, it isn't feasible. Testing remains, for the business leaders, even some of the ones that he's tapped, the number one hurdle for even contemplating putting workers back into the workplace.
Yeah, Nicole, no matter who you talk to, whether it's business leaders or even lawmakers on Capitol Hill, who my colleague Leanne Caldwell is reporting today on a call, told the president that testing was going to be extremely important as he tries to open the country. And despite everything we've hear from the president, what we've learned is that the White House is trying to figure out a way to somehow really ramp up testing. And they're looking at a number of different ideas, such as partnering with big tech companies to try to scale testing up to as much as 3 million tests a day. Now, some administration officials say that number is way too high, and that's an expectation they don't really expect to meet. But they're sort of casting about to try to figure out how to scale up testing. All the while, the president says publicly that testing is going really well. We know that, however, from the call that the president had with lawmakers today, that he basically said that testing is not going to be able to be scaled up in a really meaningful way before May 1st, when he wants to begin this reopening. And then later, on a separate call that recently concluded, the president had with governors, my colleagues Jeff Bennett and Monica Alba are reporting some new information out of there, about the plan the president's supposed to detail at 6 p.m. And broadly, it sounds like this is going to be something where the president says, look, this is all up to the governors, that it's going to have to, whatever the governors decide to do, that the buck essentially stops with them. And there was one quote where he said, you're going to call your own shot. That's what he said to the governors in terms of reopening. And he said that it'll look at caseloads by county, and he's not going to set any specific reopening date that they want to open before May 1st. That's fine. But essentially passing the responsibility there, which is, again, a dramatic shift from where he was earlier this week. But the thing that we don't know exactly what he said is what answers he had for them when it comes to testing, because it all comes back to testing. Anyone you talk to, as they said, will tell you that it really matters how much testing you have, and whether you can open even a small part of the country. That if you can't test people, then it's just not something that you can guarantee is safe.
You know, Dr. Patel, the piece of this, and let me just stipulate, I think that the president is leading a conversation pitting the country against each other in ways that don't exist. Every single American, every single person wants the country open. They want their kids back in school. They want their jobs back. 70% of the people online at food banks have never been there before. So nobody wants the country shut down. But 81% of Americans are in support of keeping social distancing measures in place because they see that that's saving lives, as the New York Times reporter, the Rome bureau chief said, Italy lost a generation of grandparents. Everyone lost their grandparents. So people can hold these two thoughts in their heads, even if the president can't. But Dr. Patel, we don't live in a country where people travel on foot. I mean, what does state by state reopening do if the virus can spread? One person on an airplane can bring it all the way across the country and create another hotspot.
Well, what it does, Nicole, is actually what we've been seeing in the last several weeks, where we had governors decide not to put in a stay-at-home order, and you saw crowded beaches. So it absolutely will create a ripple effect. And not all testing is created equal. We keep talking about it like you have a test and you've got the golden ticket. It's not that clean cut. So while we have to think about this as a country, state by state, when we don't even have the capacity to test people state by state, and we barely are starting to get data on what treatments, investigational treatments might be working in the United States, it is irresponsible and it is concerning that the president is kind of, flip-flopping on first you can give power to the states, then you can't. And I actually think the states, as usual, are left to their own devices.
Dr. Patel, take me through the best case scenario. Say suddenly, magically, everyone gets a test. If you test positive on a Monday, couldn't you come in contact with the virus on a Tuesday and then go back to work Wednesday with a different result if you were to be tested every morning? I mean, how does, if testing only marks your status at a moment in time, how is mass testing really the answer to reopening the economy either?
You're right, Nicole. It's not. It's got to be three things: testing, tracing, and isolation. And if you look at other countries, look at Germany, they really unleashed their primary care workforce from the beginning. So this isn't going to be from just a select number of people working on this at local levels. We're going to have to really radically rethink what we do. And you're right that a test on one day might not even catch the infection if it's too early to catch it. So you're going to need regular testing, but we're also going to need places in schools and in our jobs and in churches and other kind of not large gatherings. I don't think we'll have that, but we're going to need a way to kind of have, even at work, kind of social distancing. And honestly, there's no guidebook for this. Not even in medical school did we ever learn anything about this. So we're kind of making it up, but we're using science to inform us, which the president doesn't seem to want to do.
Ron Klain, you turned to science to inform some of the planning that you did in a similar role. What would your advice be right now if anyone were to see? Has anyone sought out your advice in this White House?
I've had some conversations with some folks in the administration who are career people who I used to work with on the Ebola response. You know, Nicole, what I'd say is that
tell us about them. What have they asked you?
Well, I'm going to keep those conversations confidential. I don't want anyone to get in trouble with the president. But look, the point here is this. I think that the advice is the same as what Dr. Patel just said. We have to test a lot more. And it's interesting to me that, as a matter of math, our progress towards the goal is not going to ever get there because we're going backwards. We're going to test fewer people in America this week than we did last week. We're not on a path to solve this problem. We're on a path to make this problem worse. And that's because the president doesn't want to take leadership of these tests. He said that the tests are up to the states, and the states don't have the power, the ability to direct the manufacturers to make the different components. As Dr. Patel alluded to, these tests are complicated. It involves test kits, the swabs, the reagents, parts for the test processing machines. Very complicated. Unless the president uses the Defense Production Act, steps up, takes over, drives this, we are going to see this continued miasma on testing that is not going to get better.
Ron, what would your advice be? I won't ask you to put any of the people that have reached out to you on the spot, but what would your advice be for how much of the testing solution to own? I mean, South Korea, and we talk about this all the time, they took a very different approach. I mean, many more people were tested, there were quarantines, there were fever clinics, even in China, a lot of those measures. If Donald Trump's goal is reopening the country, there's no way around those sorts of measures. You can only go through them, where you test people, you separate them, and you stamp it out that way. What would your advice be in terms of how much of that solution the White House should own?
Well, Nicole, I think this is a real paradox because I think the two halves of Donald Trump's brain are at war with one another. At the end of your last hour, you talked about his real disapproval of more accurate tallies in New York. And he is singularly focused on keeping the numbers as low as possible. He's also focused on reopening the economy. The problem is, to reopen the economy, we have to test, and testing will drive those numbers up. So it's time for the president to make the big boy choice here. And the big boy choice here is to get the testing program in gear to accelerate the use of tests that will drive the numbers up, okay? Artificially keeping the numbers down may make some scoreboard look better in his mind, but it's not putting the country on the path to testing, to tracing, to isolating, to do the things we need to do to be safer and to increase the levels of economic activity in the country.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.